Hello, welcome to Practical English for Global Leaders Business Negotiations course. My name's Andrew Abbey and I'm a director at Platinum Training Consultants and also a professor at BBT. I'll be leading you through a series of 8 lectures on business negotiations, and I'll be joined by my colleague Paul James. Paul is also a director and co-founder at Platinum Training, and Paul's going to help us by giving us some of his experiences as working as a negotiation skills trainer in the global scene. Paul, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It's good to be here, and as you mentioned, I'll share with you my experiences of delivering and actually negotiating myself with global and Japanese colleagues.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, before we start with lecture 1, I'd just like to remind you that there will be 8 speaking lessons, and the speaking lessons will be related to the content that we'll talk about over the next 8 lectures. So please pay attention to the lectures, and hopefully you can use those techniques during your speaking lessons. So good luck with those. Anyway, let's get on with lecture 1. Our first lecture is called Introduction to Successful Negotiations, and it's subtitled Getting to Yes. And this is going to be a crucial theme throughout the lecture. Now, if we take a look at the first slide, you'll see some objectives appearing. Now, our first objective will be to understand the program goals. We'll talk you through what we expect you will do over the course of the lecture series. Secondly, understand the core principles of negotiating. That expression again, getting to yes. Thirdly, to improve preparation skills. Paul's going to talk a lot about that, but basically preparations for a negotiation are very, very important. Okay, now let's take a look at the overall program overview. On the next slide, you'll see a diagram showing the English for Negotiating program, and we've highlighted 4 core skills. Those core skills are planning, as I mentioned, super important. We'll do some standard negotiation practice. This is for relatively simple negotiations where we can perhaps, finish off quite quickly. We'll then talk about persuasion. How do you move the other person towards your point of view? How do you get them to say yes? Finally, we'll talk about difficult negotiations. How do you get past no? What will you do if your counterpart just refuses your suggestion? How will you move them for that? Now, we're also going to talk about something that's very important, which is active listening. Now, at this point, I'm going to hand over to Paul, and Paul's going to talk to you about active listening. Paul, what's active listening?
Yes, okay, thanks, Andy. Well, active listening is listening by confirming, speaking, paraphrasing, and as the title suggests, actively listening to what the other person's saying.
I see.
This is a crucial skill, as Andy's just done, of communicating in all global environments, including negotiations, including meetings, any situation. Active listening is essential, but especially when you're speaking in a second language. It's to avoid misunderstandings, it's to show interest, and it's to keep things moving along smoothly. So let me just summarize what active listening means by looking at the next slide. So, what is active listening? Well, active listening is the most important skill in global communications. It includes clarifying, paraphrasing, and all kinds of summarizing to understand our counterpart's suggestions better. Let me just ask Andy a quick question. Put him on the spot if
Sure.
you like. Andy, what's the difference between clarifying and paraphrasing?
That's a good question, Paul. Clarifying basically means to make something clear. Maybe something wasn't 100% clear. We're going to say it in a more clear way. Paraphrasing means to say something in a different way. Is that the answer you were hoping for, Paul?
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Could you repeat it again?
I could repeat it again. Clarifying is to make something more clear. It's to say something in a more clear way that wasn't already clear. Paraphrasing is to say something in a different way.
Okay, I got it.
Great.
Thank you. So you may have noticed that I clarified what Andy said. Clarification is basically a simple skill of asking the person to repeat what they have already said. Many times in global situations, we don't quite understand what our counterpart said. In this situation, we have two options. We have the good option and the bad option. The bad option is to stay quiet or nod and pretend you understood. You can imagine the problems this might cause in global negotiations if you misunderstand a key point. So when we don't understand something, we simply clarify by asking for repetition. Now, as we'll do throughout these lectures, let me show you some language for clarifying. So let's move on to the next slide and we'll go through some of the language points.